Thank you for coming, and our meeting of the Social and Economic Justice Commission is now in order. Before we begin, we'll start with just a reminder and acknowledgement that we meet on lands that have long been tended and cared and loved for by the Ohlone people, among others, and that we are here and in honor of their care for this place where we are. Shall we call for the roll?
Commissioner Gary, here. Commissioner Grossman, here. Commissioner Marks, and Chair Downs.
Here.
Yes. Okay.
And right. Judy's not joining us?
No, she's not able to make it today.
Much better. She can walk around the block, but very, very slowly.
Okay.
Just FYI.
Thank you. So I think our first order of business is the approval of the minutes from February 4th, our prior meeting. Does anybody have any chance to look over those and have any suggestions or motions in relation to those?
No.
No? Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the minutes.
I second.
Okay.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes as written?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries.
Have you got a packet? I didn't. Is there one back there? Okay. Okay. I can still hold it. At least this far.
So that brings us to the next section of our agenda is public comment. Anyone who would like to address the Commission on social economic justice issues not on the agenda? Okay. All right. So staff and Commission member announcements. Would you like to go first, Isabel, or should we have the Commission members go first?
I don't have any specific announcements at this.
So at the February 18th City Council meeting, the Council took up our recommendation that originated in the Diversity Inclusion Subcommittee last year for publicizing the city's employment statistics as gathered for the EEO and federal document collecting that they do. And they received excellent input from staff on the availability of that information and voted to approve putting the demographic information on employees on the second part of our recommendation that they consider creating and then posting similar information and use it as a template for similar information on commission members. Council considered it. Staff indeed told Council that they would be able to look into the ways of mechanisms of collecting it, but Council declined to pursue that. The two pieces that were raised were, one, the potential difficulties of setting up a system for commission applicants to utilize, and another was whether there were other methods that might be used to increase diversity of the commission. So we can consider, either if we would like to consider responding on either of those fronts, of either sort of trying to engage with a process of figuring out how to present that as a viable process, and or to consider recommendations to Council on how they might pick up the stated observation that there might be other ways to increase diversity on the commissions.
Seems like an awfully thin basis for resistance. I mean, what's so difficult about asking people when they sign up for a commission what their background is?
If I may interrupt for a minute, the item is on the agenda under discussion, sure. So potentially the further discussion on the item could happen under 6.4.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. Thank you. Sorry.
All right.
Other announcements from commission members.
I just wanted to say that last Friday we had the 4th anniversary of the Showers program. And I mean, I can't believe it's been 4 years. It's going very smoothly. We had a group of Girl Scouts that came, and the leaders were kind of trepidatious. It went great. They ended up singing for the group because we had some musicians there, and it was really a nice event. So that's going on. Just a minute.
Bart, do you have any announcements?
No, not at this time.
Staff announcements? Okay, great. Presentations is the next agenda item, but I don't believe we have any.
No.
Okay, so discussion and possible action. The first one on our agenda is rent review. Do you want to remind us what we discussed?
Yes. So the staff recommendation on this item is that the commission evaluate the rent review program service data provided and make a recommendation to council that will be incorporated in the rent review program staff report to council, which is scheduled tentatively to go before council in April or May 2020. As part of the 2019 21 SEJC work plan, the Commission was tasked with receiving rent review program updates and to provide a report and recommendations to the City Council. The Commission received a mid-year update from staff on the rent review program in May 2019 and a 12-month report in December 2019, and those reports are attached to the staff report. In January 2020, the SCJC received a presentation by the program administrator, Echo Housing, and which provides counseling, conciliation, and mediation services for the city's rent review program. And attached to the staff report is the information presented at that meeting. Echo Housing also provided information on AB 1482, which was signed into law in October 2019 and addresses rent caps and just cause evictions. AB 1482 became effective January 1st. And the information that ECHO provided at that meeting is also attached to the staff report. Also included in the staff report is a table summarizing the rent review program services provided by the city and ECHO Housing between over a 12-month period between November 2018 and 2019. So the program provided 61 inquiries by landlords, responded to 61 inquiries, 69 inquiries by tenants, 24 by other people who called but may not have identified as either landlord or tenant. 9 tenants were counseled by ECHO Housing. 4 conciliation occurred and 2 mediation occurred. So, so as I said, based on the data that has been provided, now the commission, can discuss the data and formulate a recommendation to council if you wish to do that. Mm-hmm.
I must say I was very disappointed in the report. This was a program that we discussed at length. There was a lot of effort involved. There was a lot of disagreement, and we finally came to a plan. We went to this organization. I found the report rather lackluster. The questions we asked, we got rather vague answers. It seemed very bureaucratic to me. The fact that there have been this many people who they've engaged with, and they have 2 people who've gone into mediation. That suggests to me that, not every case is going to require mediation, but if they've talked to that many people, I imagine a lot of them have become discouraged since they haven't chosen to pursue it. So I still believe in this program. I think it's helpful but it doesn't seem to me that this organization is doing an outstanding job. At least that was just the feeling I had listening to the presentation.
I haven't heard that people were unhappy. I mean, what I've heard mostly is that people are still afraid to do it because they're still afraid of their landlord retaliating against them.
And you have to be a little more aggressive in reaching out to people.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
And I think, education is key. Maybe there's some people that really don't understand the process. I think if, we if there were people that could help, or kind of the guy that came, if they kind of, explain a little bit more, how the process worked, I think people would, be more keen to use it. But you're right, if they're afraid of retaliation, they won't. So somehow we need to figure out how we can streamline it where they see it as a plus versus, something that will, they'll get a slap on their hand for.
I mean, I think I agree with the comments. I do think it's going to be a challenging program to figure out exactly how to measure its effect. And one way you can imagine it working very well, as evidenced by few people needing it, because they know they'll go into it. And on another hand, you can imagine that the initial rollout, that it could be one of those things where knowledge of it builds exponentially over time as people, carry that knowledge forward. But I do agree with you that, we want to keep a heightened eye on the idea that of just making sure that if all of the work that many of the people on this commission and elsewhere did to make it, that it's come into fruition. So do you have a recommendation?
Well, I don't know if, were there other organizations that applied? Why?
No.
This was the only organization
Yes.
that applied?
Yeah, it's basically the only organization in the county that provides this type of service. And they provide it for many cities and the county. So it's, yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure what kind of recommendation. I don't want to see the program go away. It's really just started. We don't know how effective it will be, but I was not impressed at all with what I heard from those people, with their energy and enthusiasm. I just didn't feel like, they were doing much more than the minimum. And I don't know whether it might be useful to reopen the bidding and see whether there are other, or look at other methods. We did, in the beginning, talk about the city doing this itself. That seemed complex and involved creating a new bureaucracy, but on the other hand, what's the good of having a program if people are not using it? And why are they not using it? At least I would like to know, I'd like to see some data about if people are not using it, why not?
Well, I think from the city's perspective or the staff's perspective, I know Sid did a lot of the frontline work. He's the one who answered all of the inquiries from the landlords and the tenants. And often, people who he talked to were satisfied with the level of information they received and chose not to move forward. So there were a lot of inquiries at the beginning, and we did 3 workshops in the community at 3 different times, right when the ordinance started. We did a citywide mailer, and we continue to post flyers throughout the city. So I think what it is, part of it is, it's everybody's choice. We can't make people use a service, and why they're not using it, we can't really, that's not something we can assess. But I can definitely say that based on the calls received and that there was a lot of interest and there was a lot of education, and a lot of most of the people who called wanted that information. And people who moved on to Echo Housing, a lot of them needed the service, or it was resolved at the conciliation, at the conciliation.
Only 2 people pursued it. It seems discordant to me. I mean, there are a lot of people who were having problems and were upset. Now, I don't know, maybe they got help by their landlords or someone intervened, but it doesn't stand to reason that you'd only have 2 people. One of the things, I remember, we had a similar discussion when we talked about Albany Cares, and Project Hope, rather, that we need to see some data as to people's satisfaction. All we're getting here is numbers of people who were seen. That's not outcome. I would like to see some outcome data. I would like to see whether people who use the service feel satisfied. Did they, was the choice not to pursue it because they felt that they had received sufficient service, or was it that they felt discouraged? I mean, I think if we're going to contract with an organization to do a vital piece of work like this, we need to know how the consumers feel about it. and whether in fact it was helpful or discouraging. So that, at a minimum, is something I would like to see in the next contract as a requirement for meaningful outcome data.
Well, before we do anything with ECHO, I'd really like to have Sid come and talk to us about his experience, because he's the one that has the firsthand knowledge. I know I've dealt with Marjorie Roca, I think she's their executive director, and she's been very responsive anytime I've ever called her, I've always gotten a call back. So, you know, to me, that's good service. So I would like to hear Sid's analysis of how he feels the service is from ECHO, because people are going through him. Basically, he's the portal,
Yeah.
right?
And he probably has some knowledge of whether or not people are getting their needs met or whether they're giving up.
Right.
Do we, Isabel, in terms of our timing, so would it be possible for us to issue our recommendation at our April meeting, or is the timing that we should issue it, that we need to issue
No,
it?
you can wait until April. Yes, that's fine. Uh-huh.
So the city council, well, one of the things that they said when they instituted is that they are going to look at it again. And one of the things they're going to look at is what the threshold amount is, which is now 5% in Albany. So at some point, do we need to make a recommendation about what we think that threshold should be to the city council? Because if they're going to be looking at that, I would like us to give our recommendation to them about what we would like to see.
You can reopen that door if you want to. Your recommendation can be, as you know, a simple recommendation to add a survey, you know, a satisfaction survey as part of the next contract with ECHO, or it can also include looking at the threshold, looking at tenant protections. You know, you can make it as wide or as narrow as you'd like to.
Is there a sense that we would like to revisit this at our March meeting, at our April meeting, and then expect to come out of our April meeting with a specific recommendation, whether on changing standards, changing the nature of the contract or the questions we're asking, or anything else?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll all keep this under advisement and come in April. Ideally, Sid will be feeling better and able to be here to brief us, and if not, then maybe we can figure out if there's another way that he can convey information to us.
Right, and then also the commission needs to consider what the recommendation to council what you want it to include. Do you want to include some recommendation about the threshold? That's a big conversation in itself. So, should plan on maybe even talking about that a little bit tonight, so you get an idea of whether or not, because that may require some research.
Yes.
So maybe
So I
I
think
would
that's a
suggest
good
that the
idea.
commission does a little bit more discussion.
We should talk about it now.
Yeah, because the
Okay.
data that Sid's going to give you, basically, it's going to be just his experience, dealing with the inquiries that, is referrals to ECHO. But there's a whole, there's a lot of other things that the commission could talk about tonight that is not related to that.
So certainly, right, if we were to want to make a decision next meeting about a specific threshold, it might be good for you or other people with a
Right.
clear sense to help, especially
Okay.
those of us who weren't here when it was considered, think about some of the issues so that we can look toward it. Do you feel comfortable starting us off?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Mr. Campbell won't feel comfortable, but I feel comfortable. So while we were sitting here, I went to see, because the state law, the AB 1482, the threshold is 5% plus CPI, Consumer Price Index. So I went on the government, thing to see what the present Consumer Price Index is, which I can't really figure out, but this is for the Bay Area. It shows over 1 year, it was up to 4 point something in December of 18, and in December 19, it was down to 2 point something. So I don't know if they probably average it out over the year. So I don't know what that would, it was 3.1 the last time I looked but I couldn't find it tonight, I'm sorry. So to me, that would mean an 8.1, which I think is still too high. Because it's an annual, they can raise it every year. Last time the commission recommended just the prices keep raised by the consumer price index. For example, like the city of Alameda, and if the threshold is lower for a certain city, then that rent cap stays in place. So if we had less than a 5%. So the city of Alameda has a rent cap of 2.9% right now.
One question, does it stay in place if it was in place beforehand?
Yes.
But is the city allowed to introduce a new limit, lower than the state limit?
Well, it says housing units subject to local rent control ordinances that restrict the rent to less than CPI plus 5% are exempt from this. So
That isn't clear.
it doesn't talk about future, but it says
Yeah.
housing units subject to local rent control ordinances. So to me, that means any time,
Yeah. We don't have a rent control ordinance.
No, we don't. Anyway, so we need to look at, I was very happy that the city council decided to keep with the 5%. That I thought that was a good, not the consumer price index, but, that was a good amount. And plus, if a landlord can do it every year, but I'm sure we'll hear from the expert landlord, so that's where I'm at with it. I really don't want to see it to go any higher.
Right, so you're like,
Yeah.
you think 5% is reasonable?
Well, I think CPI is the best, but, okay, let's, in the, interest of fairness and the landlord getting a fair return on their
Right.
investment.
So your, at least initial thoughts are toward sustaining where we are right now.
Right.
and Recommending that it certainly not be increased.
Right.
It's interesting to think about the consumer price index, because the consumer price index doesn't have anything to say about how much disposable income people have. It says that the cost of living is higher. So if you use that as the basis for raising rents, it doesn't really say anything about whether people's ability to pay the rent. People's annual raises have been, in very, very few instances, less than more than 1%. So if you keep raising the rent, but people aren't making any more money, they're not going to be able to pay it, especially when groceries are higher and other, So I don't see that really as a very meaningful measure of anything, except for why you shouldn't raise rents, I suppose. No, I think landlords are entitled to a fair return.
If the price is going up prices are going up by 2%, then the landlord can have their price go up 2%, is how I see it. So that's why it's
I suppose.
it's an objective measure.
Yeah.
It's not a.
It's just not the right measure. But yeah, so I don't know. I thought the state was too high.
I thought so.
I don't see where people have the money to pay those increases.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the same thing, that the state is too high. So, what would you like to see us recommend to the council outside of that?
I'd like to see the consumer price index, but, I think in fairness to the landlords, and, we do want to be fair to them, 5% is a good compromise on,
The piece I can certainly understand the interest in a lower number, and on an ethical level, I endorse that, and I'm fine with that if it's our recommendation. The piece I think that would concern me would be exactly what we found. If no one can figure out what the CPI is, that it's going to be much harder for people, either in good faith, either landlords or tenants, to
Right.
know if they're, I know the city could publish it, and that we would make it
Yeah.
effective of a certain date.
well, Berkeley uses that, and then I think in February, there's some month each year where they put out and say, okay, this is what this
That's
year's
what it is, right.
your rent increase is allowed, and it's less than like 3%.
Well, now, in terms of increased expenses for landlords, if landlords do work on an apartment, for example, they're entitled to what's the word I'm looking for? They're entitled to receive that
Yeah.
that amount back. So this is just an increase that doesn't necessarily reflect increased costs, although I suppose it might affect taxes and things of that sort.
Or whatever degree they're common utilities. or
Yeah.
things like that.
Maybe, can we ask you
We
an
have it if we-
expert
we
question?
can do public comment.
Huh? I'm wondering what you're entitled to claim as additional costs over and above a rent ceiling. For example, if you do repair work, if school taxes go up, for example, are you entitled to claim those?
I don't know what you mean by claim them.
I mean, can your rent increase reflect increased costs over and above a state cap, for example?
Under 1482.
Yeah.
I don't,
Are you asking about 1482? or
I'm asking
our-
about 14 or rent review. I'm just asking about, whether we have provisions to allow you, if you, for example, have to install new water heaters or something of that sort.
No, that has not been addressed by anybody as far as I know.
Okay.
Operating a rental property is a business, and just like grocery stores have to pay the suppliers for their groceries,
Mm-hmm.
they mark them up a certain amount to make a profit. The arts and crafts stores pay their artisans a
Yeah.
certain amount based on what they want. The business has expenses, and it applies a markup.
Yeah.
And that's the price of whatever it is that's.
I would advise for the meeting that, yeah, the Mr. Campbell goes to the,
Well, I think I've got my
microphone.
answer. I don't.
We should also give him a chance for him to make whatever.
Right,
comment.
I mean, let him come in there, and then that way we know it's
So
on
if he's
record.
willing to take our questions, that's great. But we're glad.
I'm willing to enter into a dialogue if you'd like, sure.
So any comments that you would like to make on the issue, we're glad to hear.
Yeah, well, taxes go up 2% every year, property taxes, and that's substantial. If somebody buys a new property, somebody pays $1 million for a property, which is not that much anymore, amazingly. The property taxes are going to be, what's 2% of that? $20,000 a year, plus the other assessments that are in there. So you're looking at somebody having, who knows what, I'd have to look at any individual property to figure it out. But there are certainly those expenses. If somebody has just bought a property, there's a mortgage expense. I mean, a person doesn't buy a property just to buy a property. It's not a toy. It's a business. And so you've got the mortgage expense, you've got the property taxes, you have the city fees, you have the $15 a unit rent review fee. Little dig there. All of the school bond issues, all of those things get figured into what you do, what you charge. Now, that being said, if your expenses come out on for a two-bedroom unit, say, and this two-bedroom unit is in a 6-unit building, say, and your expenses come out $3,000 per unit per month, that doesn't mean you can get $3,000 a month. I checked rents. I subscribe to a website called Hotpads, and it's a rental listing and reporting agency. And I got an email from them yesterday, I think it was, and it said the average price in Albany was something like $2,400 or $2,500. That's what it was a year ago. Rents haven't gone up, as far as I can tell, that much in Albany. In my case, I haven't raised the rents, with one exception, for 2 years. The one exception is where they're way below market value, and I'm raising them gradually. And I believe in doing it all at once. Recognizing that it's difficult to, if I were to raise the rents $500, that's be a lot of money for anybody. So I don't want to do that to my tenants. Other tenants are pretty much close to market. I don't see any need to raise them above market. I probably could, because once somebody's in there, they don't want to move unless you get crazy. But I digress. You were asking about what goes into the rent, and it's whatever the expenses are. It's the taxes, it's the fees, it's the maintenance. You never know what maintenance is going to be, so you have to have kind of a fund set aside for that, or be planning on it. You never know when a water heater's going out. I had a 10-year-old water heater that maybe it was less than 10 years. It cost me $5,000 to replace it for a 4-unit building. I don't know what it costs on a single-family home, but I didn't expect it to go out after 10 years, but it did. You have to replace the roof. I don't know what a roof costs these days. The last time I replaced the roof, it was $15,000. That wasn't that long ago. And then Dish Antenna came along and punched a hole through the roof when they mounted the thing, so I had to do some repairs on the roof. Stoves go out, washing machines go out, furnaces need repair. Things happen, and you never know exactly what it's going to be. So you have to kind of plan that in your operation, and you hope that you get it right and that you are making enough money so that you get at least something back. If not today, then maybe tomorrow. You know, if I were to buy a property today, which I'm not going to do because of the high cost, but if I were, it would take me years to be able to cover the cost of owning that property just because of the increased taxes, not to mention everything else. So I don't know, anything else that I can say on that regard? Or
That's helpful, thank you.
yeah. Okay, I'll stay here and respond if you like, or I can sit down again.
So really, the only way that you can deal with all these expenses is the ability to raise rent. There's nothing else.
Ultimately, it has to be covered by the rent.
Yeah.
You know, I don't own my property for fun. I bought my property 40 years ago, with the idea that it would be essentially my retirement income, or contribute to my retirement income, and that's what it does. It just provides what I need for my day-to-day expenses. And occasionally a trip, or occasionally a new car. I haven't bought a car in 15 years. My tenants have all bought new cars in that time, sometimes multiple. But I have living expenses, and the reason I bought this property and the reason I nursed it along for 40 years is because I expected it would help me in my retirement years. And that's what it's doing. So, and I would say the majority of the property owners, the rental providers here in Albany, are the mom and pop type of people that have a single-family house, a duplex, 4 units, 5 units, 6, 7, 8 units maybe, not much more than that, who bought those properties with the idea that they would provide a supplement to their retirement income. And then when they start getting attacked for being in business to provide this necessary service, and they start being criticized for charging what we have to charge, they get rather upset about that. Did I answer the question there?
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'll still probably make comments when you're...
Any further discussion from us of what we want to, what any of us would like us to be weighing in the next month as we come in prepared in the April meeting to make a specific recommendation?
Well, I'll do a little more research on the CPI, just to...
Great. And I think if there's anything you want to share with us between now and the meeting, I'm sure that Isabel or Sid can forward it.
Okay.
So issues on the table are about our recommendation on the number and a recommendation on either the provider or the kinds of services the providers, or the ways the providers measuring their services. Great. Was that your public comment on rent review, or I don't want to? I don't want to you to feel silenced. So I know we did bring you up for questions.
I would like to make comments on the review program, if that's the time for it.
Sure.
Okay, sure.
Just a couple of comments on the things you discussed a little earlier. I appreciate your outreach efforts in trying to get the word out on this program. As you know, my organization was opposed to any kind of regulation at all. We feel that the solution you came up with, although not totally to our liking, was acceptable. We could work within those recommendations, and I urge you not to make it any more restrictive than it is, just because we've grown accustomed to it now, and it seems to be working okay. So that's all I want to say on that. One of you made a comment about ability of a tenant to pay rent, the ability of a tenant to pay rent. Unfortunately, not everybody can afford to live in Albany. And if we want to let those who want to live in Albany, excuse me for not, if we want to make it possible for those who want to live in Albany who can't afford to live in Albany, that's the responsibility of the city or some other governmental agency. It's not the responsibility of the property owner. I am not personally responsible for one of my tenants to make sure they can afford to live in Albany. So that's what I wanted to say on that. A couple of things about the report from Echo Housing, or whoever made this report, with the inquiries by landlords, inquiries by tenants, et cetera, et cetera. I think it would be really valuable to know what those inquiries were about. I mean, it's great to see that there were, 61 inquiries from landlords, 69 inquiries from tenants. What did they ask? They might have asked something very meaningful, or they might have asked nothing. Who knows? They might have just been called, like I called Sid a couple of times and said, "What's happening?" And I presume I'm one of the statistics in here. So it'd be really valuable to know what those inquiries were about. Next, the cost. The last time I was here, I asked how much it cost to run this program, and Isabel got me a figure of how much the city has spent, something like $1,500, I believe the number was. I didn't double check what she told me. But that was just what had been paid to Echo Housing. It didn't cover anything else, so far as I know. I believe I read somewhere that something like 3,000 units are covered by business licenses. At $15 a head, that means the city collected $45,000, if that number is correct. And where did that $45,000 go? It didn't go to Echo Housing. So, I think you need to look at what the cost is, where the money is going, and find out if it really is worth $15 a unit, or if it should be less or should be more. It should not be a money-making process for the city. You already get our business license, and that's for that. Can I have a little bit more time?
Sure, a little bit.
I'm just about finished, but actually, I think that's about it, all the notes I had. I think it's important to find out what it costs, let the public know, let the property owners know how much of our money is actually being spent on this program. And as I say, we're okay with the program as it is right now, but if you're making money off of us, over and above what you're already making off of us, that doesn't really quite fit right. So if you're going to make it if you're going to have this program, make sure it's effective, make sure you find out what's going on with it. Why are people not, you talked about getting information about why people are not making inquiries. Maybe they don't have a complaint. Who knows? But if you can find that out, why they haven't made the inquiries, that'll go a long way to helping you to understand what this is all about and what you need to do, and whether it's fine the way it is or if it needs to be tweaked. I don't know. I think that's all I need to say right now.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Could I clarify one thing? Because I agree with you completely that it's not your job to make it possible for people to live in Albany. I think the concern that motivated this was not bringing in new people. It was a matter of people who were here, who were in apartments, who were suddenly getting increases that they couldn't possibly afford. It seems like things have kind of plateaued now, and that seems not to be happening at all as frequently as it was, but
Yeah.
that was what initiated this.
Yeah, and there's bad apple in every barrel, and there are certainly some landlords who will gouge as much as they can, and they deserve what they get. That's not morally conscionable. I don't think the vast majority of the property owners are interested in doing that. So you hear about the ones that do cause a problem. You don't hear about all the good ones. I mean, there are lots of properties around here where the rents are way below what one would expect to pay in Albany. And the owners say, well, I just wanted to have a little extra income, and I like the tenant, and this, that, and the other thing. Landlords don't like to kick out tenants. It's expensive. If you were to kick out a tenant, first of all, you'd have to fight them, probably. And, the rent income stops as soon as they want to fight it, and it takes months. I don't have personal experience, but I understand it takes months to get somebody out with no income from that unit. You don't know what the people are doing in the unit. It's difficult to get in to look at it. There are all kinds of problems with kicking somebody out. Most property owners are not interested in kicking somebody out. They like to have their tenants, they like that flow of income. That's what they have the property for, is to have income. And they want to keep their tenants happy. You talk about tenants being afraid of their landlords. That may be the case. I don't know how much of a problem that really is.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it, Mr. Campbell.
Okay, thank you.
I would agree that with what the gentleman said about finding out where the money is being used. So I think as part of our recommendation, we would need to make sure we have that data available so we can, make sure that,
The information will be included as part of the staff report to the city council.
okay.
Okay. And does it seem like we'll have that for our April meeting?
No, we're preparing the information for the council meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that it seems an important concern, because if we've only paid them $1,500, it seems like it would take an awfully long time before.
No, but there's also city costs.
Even
Staffing,
so.
mailing.
The printing material.
Yes, there's a lot of costs not included, and this was just the cost of the contract
Yeah.
with ECHO.
Yeah.
But all the other costs have to be calculated.
Okay, well, good. All right.
So it sounds like if we're not going to have that information at our April meeting, that our recommendation to council would be that council.
Yeah, and the financial piece is really not under the purview of the commission. It really falls under the purview of the council.
Right. All right, ready to move on? Next item is Albany Cares. Do you want to?
Again, this is the commission, the staff recommendation is that the commission review the data provided in the Albany Cares annual report, which was provided to you on February 4th at the last meeting, and discuss items to include in a recommendation on services needs in Albany that will be incorporated in the Albany Cares staff report to the City Council in March or April 2020. Just a little bit of background. The Albany Cares provide outreach, assistance, and referrals to resources and services that support Albany's most vulnerable and low-income residents. Staff has been provided quarterly reports to the SEJC, which include client tracking of outreach activities, client demographic information, types of services requested, and referrals provided. As part of your work plan, you were tasked with receiving updates and to provide a recommendation to council. And again, that the recommendation will be part of the staff report that will go to council. So again, Albany Cares has been responsive to the needs of the vulnerable individuals and families in Albany. The total assisted by Albany Cares has increased steadily over the course of the year. Additional volunteers could be helpful to assist staff in the delivery and promotion of services. And I'm happy to report that since the last meeting, we have one more volunteer in the program. Having some of the other recommendations or this part of your discussion at the last meeting included having, you discussed having BART tickets on hand to distribute to clients who have transportation issues. The program staff also has also been able to learn and identify specific needs of the community around affordable housing, such as assistance with submitting applications for subsidized housing units, housing case management for clients who are not experiencing homelessness, and a need for below market rate housing. And somebody who needs, who is not homeless and needs affordable housing within 6 months to a year. So that's definitely a service need that is not readily available to the community at this time. And as Anne-Marie reported, free, affordable legal advice is harder to come by, and assistance connecting with public benefits is also difficult for a lot of people. So those are the things that were reported to you and that you discussed at the last meeting. Again, the recommendation is the the staff recommendation is that you continue your discussion, and if you choose to make a recommendation on service needs in Albany, because it was always the hope that by having this program, the program would also give you information on unmet needs that may not be obvious, but that, by having this program and finding out what those needs are, so.
Right. So thoughts?
Well, so I'm looking at the number of contacts went from the first quarter was 124 to the fourth quarter of last year, it was 306. And I know Anne Marie would really like to get at least a second person, at least a part-time second person, if not full-time. She feels like she can't handle everything, even though I volunteer there too, but I think she does a lot of stuff when not during drop-in hours, but during other hours. So it would really be helpful to her to have a second person that is somewhat knowledgeable. She's an attorney and a social worker, trained. So she has these great skills. They're very helpful for us. And she's been great, but she could use the help.
So a potential recommendation could be to explore.
Right, hiring an assistant for her.
She's half-time, right?
I think it's more than half. Maybe 30 hours?
Yes, so just a little under 30.
Okay, yeah.
So wouldn't it make sense to think about increasing her time, or is she not available?
Well, I think the idea is maybe not talk about the person herself, but talk about staffing in general. So is it, right now you have a 30-hour-a-week person. Would it make sense to, you have an FTE, and then would it make sense to add 20 hours, to add 25, another 30 hours? Just think, I would think about it in those terms.
Well, what I'm thinking about is, should it be a full-time position? It was hired, at a reduced amount of time because nobody wanted to put out too much money in the beginning. We didn't know what was going to happen. But what's happening is the numbers are quite substantial. And and they justify more than a half-time position. And I think that, one of the things that struck me is the number of people who were contacting her directly rather than through the volunteer programs. So obviously, she needs a lot more time to follow up on these kinds of issues.
Yeah, she gets a lot of people leave a lot of messages.
Yeah, so she's doing a lot of resource finding and making referrals and connections for people.
Right.
So it seems to me that we would at least want to say to the council that this certainly justifies more than a half-time position, probably at least a full-time position, and maybe, I would think, perhaps some clerical assistance.
Well, she has an assistant from the senior center. I'm not sure what this person's availability to her is, and I don't think he can do some of the kinds of things that she needs this person to do. Like, the skill level is not.
We're definitely looking at other ways to add staffing because we recognize that there's a need for it and that the program demands it. So it's already in progress. I can't really speak about what that's going to look like, but we're definitely looking at that because we do see that there's a need. And we know with the integration of Albany Cares within the recreation department and the senior center, there are more staff resources available, but I think the type of expertise needed for this program requires probably that somebody else, additional staff with that specific expertise.
So if we made such a recommendation, it would
be, or let me just, I would say if I'm hearing both this desire for increased staff time and also a sense from you, Isabel, about the way that staff is managed, that it makes more sense rather than us sort of suggesting one sort of set in concrete mode, that we might say that, based on what our understanding is that the city might explore the need for 10 to 20 more hours. however, it gets apportioned, or whatever number, that we came up with.
Additional staffing up to, I think your original recommendation for this program was, again, it was a part-time, 50% FTE.
Yeah.
And that's.
As an experiment.
As an experiment, exactly. And we ended up, I think we started at 50%, and now it's actually at 30 hours, so over 50%. So there is a need for increase the hours again, and we're looking into that, definitely.
The other point I would make is, you mentioned, for example, that you've identified some needs that the city is not able to meet. Now, she's certainly not in a position to do program development. There needs to be time for that as well. I mean, if in fact we want to do something about this problem, which might involve reaching out to other agencies, you mentioned the need for free legal services. There is a Berkeley Law Clinic, for example, but somebody would have to go and make an arrangement and see what could be, so I mean, she needs time apart from just responding, if we're going to have a meaningful program.
And the needs identified, most of the needs identified, unfortunately, are not resolvable because it's a supply and demand at this point. It's just there's so much need and not enough capacity for of the services. So.
Well, I'll tell you, she does, like, every month, she prints out these for each county, Alameda County, Contra Costa, and Marin County. She prints out these lists of housing that's available, below market rate housing. So they come out every month, and then depending upon if you are low income or if you're disabled or if you're a family, there's some of them are open to only certain categories. So she always puts, she does a great job of putting what category the housing's available. And so I've referred personally a lot of people to those, they're below market rate. We help them fill out, they have to fill out usually for every apartment, they have to fill out this form to get into the system to be on the waiting list. So she does that every month, and that must take her, I don't know how long, but she puts those together herself, she was saying today. I mean, if she had someone that could even do flyers for her, she'd be really happy. Because she doesn't have time to do it, but she has been doing it for the housing because it's such a big need. Every single time I've been there, I've helped at least 2 people about housing. So that gives you some idea of what she does. She's doing a great job that way, but it has to take her a lot of time to get it together.
So, Chair, I think making the recommendation to add maybe 15 hours to her schedule now, and then also a clerical person to, like she said, to do just some of the basics, maybe like an intake person to kind of, screen different people as they come in. Then that way, if that person can handle what the issue is, they can just work with that clerical person, and then she would get more of the bigger complaints. I don't know, but I think the recommendation is to see how we can get more staff hours for her and maybe bring in someone part-time to help.
I could talk to her in the interim too to find out maybe, or should I not do that? I don't want to give her any kind of unrealistic expectations or
so that shouldn't be an option. I think
You're right. Okay,
basically
we'll
we
just
just
talk
make the
about it
recommendation and then go from there.
It is a little bit of a conflict since you also work there
So, what I'm hearing is a widespread sense that we should recommend increased staff time. My own inclination would be to be relatively flexible rather than saying we're recommending something that, it's hard for us to assess exactly what's needed and also we could lock them in. So I would say, though, that we all agree. Do we want to go ahead? I think we can make the recommendation this meeting, or we could make it in April. Is that right, Isabel? Or we should make it this meeting? We may be ready to make it.
Yeah, if you're ready to make it, then we can move forward with the staff report.
The language that we want to, that we, endorse continuing Albany Cares, obviously, it seems like, and that we call for council to work with staff to assess increased staffing to meet the increased demand.
Yeah, and I think it would be appropriate, sort of as a preamble, to say that we entered into this process to see if it would be effective, and it has been. And the numbers are increasing exponentially, and we need to increase the support.
Right. Okay. Is that clear enough? Do we need a motion, Isabel? And
Yes.
Okay. So does anybody
Okay,
want to make a motion?
I move that we recommend to the city council that, given the success of the Albany Cares program, that the council look at adding more staff hours, and I would like to say 20, at minimum of 20. I don't know, maybe that's not, maybe
I
we
mean,
shouldn't
I
be
think once
specific.
they figure out what the dynamics of her work is and what is needed,
Okay.
they can kind of allocate the hours. But for right now, I think we just need to move and make the
Yeah.
recommend, on the motion
Yeah.
for them to do that.
Well, the staff report, I imagine, will be more specific.
Correct,
And Isabel
correct.
knows what, more than we
Right,
do.
right. So,
All right,
So you want to say your motion one more time?
Okay,
we can-
so that we recommend that the city council increase the hours for staff people for the CARES program because it's, obviously successful and, needs the support from the city.
and I'll second that motion.
Second, okay. Discussion?
We might want to say professional hours or something along those lines to make sure that we're not,
Yeah, see, she's never said to me, I want to work more hours, so I don't know if that's this is good, that we're not saying it's her or it could be anybody, right?
all right, I'll leave that to
Okay.
Isabel.
So are we ready to vote? Okay. All in favor?
Wait, is there public comment?
Public comment, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to.
All right.
Cut
Okay.
you out of the fun.
All right.
Okay. All in favor of Margie's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions? I believe it passes. Thank you all.
All right.
So next is the sugar-sweetened beverage tax. I know that we talked about this last time, so hopefully it's fresh in our minds. But Isabel, do you want to make sure, do you mind just introducing it so we're all on the same page?
So you started the conversation on this at the last meeting. The SCJC shall prepare a recommendation for the use of sugar-sweetened beverage tax proceed for fiscal year 2021, which starts July 1st, 2020, and ends June 30th, 2021. What else can I tell you? So the ordinance is attached. The recommendation you made for this fiscal year is also attached. And the current and approved expenditure plan for the sugar-sweetened beverage tax is also attached for your information. What else can I? And the last thing is that the workshop, the City Council workshop for the SSB tax will be held on April 20th, 2020. And the SCJC is usually present to make a presentation of your recommendation.
It may well be that I may be out of town, and so I may ask if someone or multiple others. So it sounds like, again, we can make our recommendation this meeting, or we can discuss it and decide if there are any aspects that we need to take into account, and definitely have to have a recommendation by our April meeting.
Yes.
Is that correct? Thank you. And what we at least put on the table last time was that, at our last meeting, was that in 2019, we filling a budget, and that was an interesting process, but then if I recall, none of the things that we selected were picked, and so there was at least floated the idea last time of thinking about, rather than trying to create a full budget, of trying to figure out things that we would really like to highlight as area, that we might want to pick one or two things and really say that, we want to push for these. Though, of course, the will of the commission is the will of the commission. So any thoughts?
Well, the one complicating factor is that, and I think this is correct, Isabel, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me that there was a big chunk of this that went into the school crossing guard. That troubles me on several levels. First of all, it's not really connected to the purpose of the tax. And secondly, it seemed to me a little strange that the school system was not paying for that. It disturbs me that meant that the things we recommended couldn't be done. And I think we worked very hard to get those recommendations, and I don't see any point in developing more recommendations, because that's what we thought then, and I don't feel any differently now.
Certainly, one thing we could do is endorse the recommendations or
And
amendments.
say-
Okay, I will say, one of our recommendations was a podiatrist to go to the senior center, which they didn't spend soda tax money, but the city is now providing that, and seniors, Albany seniors get that service free of charge.
Sure, and that's
If they
good, but
live
it
out-
shouldn't come from a beverage tax, so.
Right, it's not coming from the
right that it's
beverage
not-
tax.
Yeah.
It's-
mhm.
Yeah.
Do I-
That did happen, and it's going successfully at
Yeah.
the senior center.
Yeah.
Do I remember, Isabel, that there was a suggestion that there would be a difference in where the funding for crossing guards was going to come from, or I may have just misremembered that?
For this coming
for next
fiscal
year.
year, for this coming fiscal year, to be honest, I don't think we've identified any other source of
I see.
funding for
Okay.
the crossing guard
So
program.
it may well be part of this budget. yeah.
And I've talked to a couple of city council members, and it is going to go again this year. That money's going to go to the crossing guards, because they don't have any other place to find it.
What about the big tax measure that we just passed?
So that is a replacement for one that is expiring, so the.
Yeah, that was
majority
Measure
of
L that
or-
they
yeah, I
replaced.
think
Oh,
you're
it's-
asking about Measure.
Measure B, yes.
right?
Yeah.
So that is replacing one that is expiring, so there is a marginal.
But it's not a direct, well, anyway, I don't want to get into an argument
Yeah.
about that, but anyway, it just, I would like to see the money for the beverage tax spent on things that are related to health, and I guess crossing guards are related to health, but pretty tangential.
I mean, if I remember the theory, I mean, I suspect there are a multitude of reasons why council supports it, including sort of, the obvious sort of ability of parents to mobilize support for it, which is, representative democracy. If I remember last year, some of the discussions centered around things like increasing walking and, people walking to school and not being driven. Does have some fitness, so in that sense, I think was part of the, not just the safety of not being struck, but the fear that people would stop walking, and therefore, that the spending of the money helps continue the practice of people walking to school. Certainly, we can make lots, any other recommendations.
Well, I have the suggestions from last year. I
Yeah.
mean, that Judy, as a registered nurse, came up with
That's right.
the stuff about to bring mobile medical clinics. I mean, if we could get like a mobile medical clinic that would come to the showers program, or that would show up at CARES, right? That could be a useful, and then mobile dental clinics, which I think is even a bigger need for a lot of people. Use established school or youth programs in Albany to serve as a service delivery point. So, I mean, I thought those were really great suggestions, but none of them happened. They did these exercise programs, like under the BART track. I think that was one of the things that happened. So,
We could certainly
yeah.
recommend any or all of those again. Other thoughts? So I do agree that that Judy's recommendations last time were, well considered, based both on her background and the work she put into them.
What was the price point on having the mobile dental and medical?
Well, what she said for the mobile medical clinics, that we would provide clinics on a regular basis, $40K a year maximum. And then for the dental clinics, it was $60K. And for the wellness clinic at the senior center, it was $60K. So we were trying not to go over, because we knew they were spending whatever it was for the crossing guards. So we were trying to just stay within what the limits were.
I think that's right. Then we could ask if we didn't want to make a recommendation this meeting, but did on April, we could either ask Judy if she, if she'll be here, if she would like to update any of them, and/or if not, to communicate either via Isabel or Sid or through one of us.
Do we have any idea of what the tax is now bringing in?
It was written in the report.
So the city has received a total of $653,000 in revenue since the measure passed, and council has appropriated $594,000 in the last 2 years, and we expect to receive approximately $250,000 in 2021.
As compared to 600 in the previous year?
So that's a
No, total since the
2
measure
years.
passed, so
I
a
see.
little over 2 years.
So it's roughly 300,000 a year? And has it gone down a little bit? Is that what I'm?
We're not seeing a decline.
Oh, really? Because there was an expectation, right? That if it
Not
were.
right now. Doesn't look like it, no.
That's the
Well,
problem.
bad news, good news.
The problem with sin taxes.
People keep saying it.
People keep saying
But
it.
I'm proud of us. We were the last city to get it in before they passed the law that no city could pass their own soda tax.
So, I mean, I definitely hear interest in revisiting the ones that we created last year. Is it the sense that we would like to finish this on our April meeting so that if either people want to refine those or come up with other suggestions?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, because I would like to read more into the mobile and dental. That sounds like an excellent idea, that a lot of residents could benefit from that, so.
And one of us could communicate to Judy
Yeah.
about
Yeah, I'd like to have.
public comment on this. Okay.
That's a lot of soda.
It is.
I did a calculation, and I just came up with something like, I forget what the number was, but something like 48,000 gallons of soda or something like that. A lot of soda. My comment is, I guess, in regards to what you do with that money. And it seems to me that as far as adults are concerned, adults know what they're doing, and if they're going to drink sugar water, that's their business, and they should pay for that. The focus of this, as I see it, is towards the kids and educating the kids to take other alternatives. And looking at the programs that have been implemented, it doesn't look like that's happening. And maybe I'm wrong, I hope I am, but it doesn't look like it is based on what's in this packet of materials. So I urge you to think about what kinds of programs you can have, educational programs, peer pressure programs, getting a sugar-free club in the high school or something, I don't know. There's got to be some really effective way to help educate kids to be a little bit more healthy in their life and in their lifestyle. I mean, sugar is just one problem. Look at the vaping problem that we have. A major, major problem, and nobody's been able to get their hands around that yet. Just along the same line, but my wife, I don't know where that came from. She died many, many years ago.
We won't explore that.
You won't tell her.
Okay. My wife works at the community garden in Albany Park, and she's been after people at the city here to do something about the vandalism, the things that kids do there. Apparently kids go there at night or whenever, they throw bottles against the wall, there's broken glass there all the time, and the kids are bored. They don't have anything else to do. So let's find some way to use these funds that you are collecting in a really effective way to keep the kids engaged and help them to learn a better lifestyle and to be more responsible citizens within our community. They don't realize it yet, but they are citizens of the community, and they should have a stake in it. So that's my only comment.
Thank you.
I know that two years ago, we spent money on water filling stations, and like at the high school, and maybe buying reusable water bottles for high school students, or or the middle school students. Spending money that way to encourage them to drink water is a way of spending the money. I don't know.
There's also $10,000 allocated in this expenditure plan for a Healthy Me Music and Movement program in the kindergarten and actually pre-K classes. And it's actually a program that provides education on nutrition and healthy choices and uses dance and music as a way to educate youth on that. And it's been very, very successful.
And am I right that also some of these funds go toward carrying the costs of youth cooking programs?
Yes, so we've been able to subsidize cooking camps and cooking classes for youth and adults.
Right. Oh, and adults too.
I would like to thank you for your comment because that makes me think, like you said, the youth are bored, so they're vandalism, they're destroying city property. But I would like to do some research on how we can get an outdoor programs, probably middle schoolers and high schoolers that are just, finding a way to do something. And if we can utilize that money to have some type of activity or some type of engagement with the youth, I think that would help as well. So I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I think that'll be something to look into and just see if something is there.
So I think we'll keep it under advisement and bring it up on April.
The only point I was going to make is part of, we have various programs for adults, but I wonder, do we have a program for adults about the dangers of these products? Because ultimately, if we're talking about kindergarten kids, they're not deciding what's coming into the house. It's their parents are. And once they get acclimated to sugar-sweetened beverages, it's much harder to get that out of their lives. So I don't know whether, through the PTA or something, there could be some education about, healthy products for kids.
Right. So that's certainly something we could suggest. Great. So we will take this up and finish it at our April meeting.
And on the question of youth, I have a concern too, and it's bigger than this, I think. And when we haven't really talked here very much about what are the needs of Albany youth.
Right, and I agree. I'm totally, like I said, it's usually our middle schoolers and our high schoolers, because like you said, elementary, pre-K, they're under the influence of their parents, and like you said, what goes in the house, what comes in. But when you get to middle school and high school, parents are either still at work or not available, or whatever the case may be, the kids are going out. And if we have programs for them when they get out of school, like at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, something educational outside of the school, I think that's just something we need to look into. So.
Well, we don't have that many elementary schools in Albany. What if we had like a healthy snack department in each school that was funded by this, with just healthy snacks, with water and fruit and, what would be available to the children after school or whatever.
Maybe what I would like to suggest for the next agenda is that we talk about how we might find out about the needs of Albany youth
Yeah,
and what services we
That would be
are
good.
providing and should be.
that would be good. That would be good.
That would be good.
And then we'll be able to go from there to see what we can do to fulfill those needs, so.
There are, there are a lot of
I
programs.
see a work plan amendment request coming down the line.
Well, I just got on here, so maybe.
We're running out of things, so we would start.
So, Inclusivity Diversity Committee, we have 2 updates. I'll come back in a minute to the City Council one. Janelle, did you want to present the other? Okay, sure.
You can start it and then I'll.
As I said, council passed and it is up on the website and is available. Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. It was helpful for you to be here tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Council passed, and then staff, the next day, if I'm not mistaken, put it up as a link on the website toward the information, so that the concern we had, that we had information that we were collecting, but it was hard for citizens to access, that has been addressed. The piece of it that did not go forward was our request that it be utilized as a framework for building a program for commission. Staff did present that they would be, able to look into methods to do it, and council did not request that they do so. So if there's discussion on that, we can, or if not.
No, I just want to say that's excellent. I was glad to see that on the website because I think that gives, people outside of city kind of a glimpse of what's happening in our city and how we're promoting growth and moving forward. So it's an excellent idea.
I don't understand the council's decision on commissions because, it's clear that and there have been discussions about this before, that council needs to do some outreach, but it would really be more helpful to do outreach if one understood who one had and where the gaps are. And I don't see why that would discourage anybody or anything. What would be the negative result of knowing, people's backgrounds and having that be public?
So I think there was a confidentiality concern, which is a legitimate concern that we don't want.
Well, nobody's
people's
forced to
data being-
disclose anything,
Well, and I think if it's more broad and not, pinpoint. I mean, because if you pull our names up on the website, our names show who we are. So I think because, commissions, people come and go, but it wouldn't hurt just to do like an overview, like, the past 2 years we've had, this amount in this nationality or another amount. So, I mean, that's something we can think about on a broader level than versus, pinpointing like we have this many versus others. So.
Yeah, I don't want to be speculating about council's motives other than what was said. I do think it's notable that council did not want to have attention paid to the decision that they make. And that this is the area they have control over and the area that they did not want attention cast to it. I think that in terms of our movement going forward, we could either look to devise a, way to come up with a system, with the help of staff that we could then present in order to speak to any of the confidentiality or practical concerns, or we could utilize the statement that, the money and time could be better spent coming up with a plan for how we might publicize and bring in more applications and present that to council and see if that was something that was raised as a serious or sincere point, or if it was raised just to block this.
I like Janelle's suggestion very much of being able of presenting the data in a cumulative form rather than, because that doesn't put anybody on the spot, but it allows the community to see where there are gaps. And it might be used to encourage people from various groups to get involved.
The question was, I was asked about, if we had an opinion about breaking it up by commission, which would obviously raise a lot more questions about confidentiality or grouping all commissions together. And I said that my recollection of it is that I said that we deferred to the judgment of staff and council. So that was something that came up, but we could certainly,
You start with what you can get and then you build.
So we can consider that again it sounds like there's certainly interest in figuring out how to move from this toward diversifying commissions through whichever path, and we can take that up again on subcommittee and bring it back to you all, it sounds like.
Right, and it can be used as, like you said, as a marketing tool. We're going out speaking to council members, recruiting people. You can use that data to kind of, encourage one to be a part of the commission. So I guess it's just how we present it to them, and in that fashion, I'm sure they would be willing to move in that direction. One would think.
But I did want to thank Isabel and Sid, both in our process here and in presentation to council, that they were clear and supportive. So appreciate that.
I just looked at the Senior Citizen Chronicles for this month. I was shocked to see Albany had an African-American woman mayor in like 1960.
Yeah,
I was shocked.
That is true.
yeah,
I never knew. That's our history. Like,
yeah. And there was an attempt to remove her.
Oh,
God.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
So, Janelle, do you want
Let's
to give
keep
the other
moving.
update?
Yes, Chair. So, I think, Chair, I think, 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 The chair and I got together and thought about diversity in the city. And, when I attended the council meeting on Monday, and I brought this with me, I looked at the statement that they have about diversity, and I think, Albany should, stand for what they're stating. And so we thought about Martin Luther King. We do recognize that as a national holiday in the city of Albany, but we thought about, what would the commission think about us doing some type of activity to bring the community together. Martin Luther King was all about unity. And so if we are a city that wants to, stand behind that statement about diversity and unity to bring, the community together, I think we should, at least consider it, or to put it on a calendar, or do something in that fashion. Our cities around us, El Cerrito, they've done a march for over 30 years. Could even thinking about uniting with them. Again, unity, just bringing that visibility to Albany that, we're progressively moving forward, and that, we understand what it is to have a diverse community. So
I think the city has used that day as like a volunteer day, right?
Yes, so the Recreation Department puts on a volunteer day where we've done different things. We have had organizations submit to us the volunteer opportunities, and then we ask people to commit to serve. And then they peruse the different volunteer opportunities and commit to volunteering a number of hours to different organizations. So we've done that. This year, the Commit to Serve was a partnership with the Friends of Five Creeks, and it was around the cleaning of, I think it was Cordonices Creek. So we always do some type of event on Martin Luther King.
But maybe it could be geared more toward a unity or message, or something like that.
right, and
that service.
The whole deal was not
together, yeah.
to knock the volunteering, because I think that is important. But I think like our neighboring cities coming together. Piedmont did an event this year where Congresswoman Barbara Lee spoke and just kind of rallied the people and talked about the importance of us coming together. So it's something to think about. I think if the commission wants to make a recommendation and such, we give it more thought and see what happens.
We have to change our work plan for that, right? If we're going to be talking about Martin Luther King Day.
No,
and-
it's diversity and inclusion.
Okay,
It's
part
very
of
much
it. Yes,
what's
that's
in the
right.
work
Never-
plan.
okay.
Yeah.
So, one follow-up that we could do would be when Sid's back, it sounds like would be an appropriate staff contact about what recreation's plans have been,
Yeah.
and how we could consider ways of engaging with that and how it's gone. And
'Cause
Well, I
this
think
isn't
your
something
path
that
would be
needs-
to make a recommendation to council on,
No, we don't need to.
something.
Yeah, we don't have to make a recommendation to council about that. That's something that you guys decide, right?
no, if you want the city to create a new event,
Well, we have a Martin Luther King event. The question is what goes on in it.
well, it's different. Like if you're putting on a parade or a gathering or a speaker, that's very different than inviting people to commit to serve. So it has a
You could
different.
add to that commit to serve. You could begin with everybody assembled together and have a program before people go out and
Yeah.
volunteer. There are a variety.
It still would need to go to
Part of the
council.
program. I don't know. Does council get that involved in the specifics of what happens when you have an event?
Commissions in general don't either, get involved in what departments provide. It usually comes from the budget process and the allocation of resources. So.
We can begin here with some conversation about these things, and to the extent that we're all in agreement, we can decide what needs to go to council and what doesn't.
Exactly, yes. But there is any type of event would need to go to council because it's an allocation of resources.
Yeah, assuming
Yeah.
it's a new event, but if it's anyway.
The current event that we do for MLK is not, there's an allocation of resources, but it's very minimal.
Yeah. Well, I think in general that to the extent that we can provide some events that link to, to people's specific group concerns, we have a significant population of Asian immigrants, for example, in this community and we do now have a Chinese New Year parade, although I don't think the city sponsors it, does it?
Yeah, they have an event for China.
Yeah, we do have an event for children that's geared towards children at the community center. It's a very well-attended event. But then I think it's the Solano Avenue Association that does the parade
Yeah.
and on the weekend.
Yeah,
during
because
the-
one of the things I wonder about, I mean, we have therefore a population of people who are not currently citizens, and that may be a disincentive to them to participate. I mean, I think they may not, since they don't vote, they seem to get less involved. Partly there are language gaps. I mean, I think we need to make some specific outreach attempts. That's a very significant population we have. We also have a Latino population, which is to a certain extent hidden.
Right, and the goal would be to bring them out. I
Yeah.
mean, to reach out and just let them feel that they're welcome here. You know, if they're hidden because I have a place to stay, I don't feel welcome, but I'm going to stay here. But the goal is to bring them out and have a celebration of what that looks like. I think that would be something we should consider, or at least, the staff could work on.
Sounds like there's interest in the subcommittee continuing to pursue it, and if people, other commissioners have suggestions, ideas, you can either bring it to us individually, as long as we've got careful consideration of the Brown Act, and revisit it next time.
We had some conversations at Marge. You talked a lot about the need for English as a second language.
Right, there's no ESL classes for adults in Albany. I mean, that's my husband teaches to adults in Richmond, and the school there, while the children are in elementary school, he's teaching their parents, English skills. It's like, we don't have that in Albany.
It's certainly also something else that we can take.
Look, we'll get there. We'll just baby steps at a time.
Right.
Aging in place.
Okay, I addressed two of the issues that we talked about at the meeting and put a little more meat around them. There's other issues, I know that, but I thought I'll start with these two, and then if we agree, then I'll incorporate this stuff into the report as it was written. So one of the things that you asked me to do was to discuss why we wanted the city to join the World Health Organization and AARP in this age-friendly cities. So you automatically get entered into this network. There's a wide range of free resources, opportunities for partnerships with other cities. The network provides cities with resources to become more age-friendly by tapping into national and global research, planning models, and best practices. Joining that work means that Albany's elected leadership has made a commitment to actively work with residents and local advocates to make our city an age-friendly place to live. This is public recognition for committing to become age-friendly. The network helps local leaders identify and understand community needs. It fosters partnerships among community groups and local stakeholders. The network provides access to technical and expert-led webinars. AARP will work with local officials to facilitate Albany's enrollment and guide the city representatives through the network's implementation and assessment process. After enrolling in the network, 60% of member communities achieved a change in public policy, most often by integrating an age-friendly lens in community planning. 34% achieved a private sector investment or action such as local retailers and restaurants securing age-friendly business designations, which I think would be great for us, commitments by builders to expand use of age-friendly design standards. 85% described other successes such as raising awareness of livability issues. Okay, other Bay Area cities in the network in the year they joined. Berkeley was 2016, Oakland 2018, Alameda County 2019, Emeryville 2018, Marin County 2018, San Francisco 2014, and Santa Clara in 2019 became the first county in the city to have all cities become part of the network. So I think it would behoove Albany to,
It's good.
and I've already signed up on the AARP to anyone can sign up, but I get these emails about aging in place and information that's very helpful, probably weekly from AARP. So it's just that information alone is really good. So that would be our, why we want to join this network, what the advantages to us would be. Then we also talked about, you wanted a little more meat around a task force and a leadership team. And, I wasn't so, AARP does describe putting this team together. And when Robin, who is the director of the senior center, she went to an aging in place seminar, and she came back and she said, we have to get this, we have to get a team in place. I mean, she was really like gung-ho on the team. Unfortunately, Robin's retiring, which is sad, but. So the task force leadership, so the leader of the team could be a volunteer, community activist, agency staff member, or someone employed by the city. Have a passion for the livability project, have expert knowledge, willing to put in the time to see the project through. Comprised of people who bring different perspectives to the work being done. This would mean people from government, volunteer sector, local businesses, academics, social service providers, and residents. Ensure diversity on the team by including people who live in different neighborhoods or who represent different interests, such as artists and business owners, and those who have resided in Albany for longer and shorter periods of time. The team should represent the ethnic, cultural, and racial diversity of Albany, as well as different income levels. So we would be looking for a task force that would head this up. Now, Robin thinks that we need to hire they suggested hiring a consultant to head this up, which, I think that would be up to the city council if they want to do that. But it is very helpful to have the team in place that looks through this aging in place. So there's other topics that I'm putting some meat around that I'll bring back to the next meeting. But if you agree with these, I can just incorporate this into the report now, just for its more meat around what I've already provided for you.
Yeah, that's great. I like that.
Okay? All right, then I'll keep working on it. Okay, great.
Thank you.
One comment I would like to make about, and I don't know if this belongs in this report or whether this comes out later when we get the team in place, but I'm increasingly concerned about issues of street safety. And I was at a meeting of, Peggy has meetings of her various commission people, and I was at one the other day. And I mentioned something that's been very concerning me is that we've changed the lighting in the city quite severely. And for a while I thought maybe this is just me, maybe my eyes are going, but a lot of people who were there said the same thing, that basically it is increasingly dark. Somebody talked about a break-in that occurred, and the police made the comment that it was too dark, that you can't see from one end of the block to the other anymore. And so that issue, the issue of street signs that are unreadable at night.
Yeah, or not there.
And
That's the worst part.
right, or lights that are so short that you
Yeah.
can't possibly get across the street if you have a walker or a cane.
Well, I think this all comes under the infrastructure,
Yeah.
of the city, so, yeah.
Yeah, well, we might want to,
I think we do want to make a recommendation about that.
yeah, and
Going
we might want to
forward.
make a recommendation to traffic and safety.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with those, and I also agree that I think that the goal of the, the process that you're looking at is that both on individual things, but you really build into the process. There's
Right.
a moment where people say, how is this likely to affect an aging in place environment?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Peggy made some interesting points, too, about, because, the Traffic and Safety is now the Transportation Commission.
Right.
And that's important, because nobody's been in charge of public transportation in the city, really. And she was pointing out that, there are a lot of changes that are being proposed that are not going to work for seniors and disabled people. For example, getting rid of parking at the BART, if there's no way for people to get there. So, I think those are pretty critical issues right now that need to be moved on. People acknowledge them, but nobody does anything.
I just wanted to let you know also that as the Public Works Department will be conducting an evaluation of current street lighting conditions
Are they?
to increase safety at night. So that is coming up in the next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it did get made worse. It wasn't so bad. You know? Now we're gonna have a commission investigate why it's bad. But yeah.
Well, the other thing I was looking at too was I would really like to see a shuttle bus that goes from one end of Solano to the other. And like Robin told me, they're getting BB money to buy a new bus for the senior center. So then that van would be available. I mean, the city, I don't know, but I would really like to see that would help people from the below San Pablo, come up to the other. It would just, because we do have because I do want to look at like what percentage of seniors are living in each neighborhood, right? And I think there's a high percentage living down there because it's a lower income neighborhood generally.
Yeah.
And
18 turns at San Pablo, is that right?
I'm not sure, but I don't think, it doesn't go all the way down Solano
It doesn't come
to
in
the
Jackson
frontage
or
road,
whatever.
right? Especially when we get that apartment building down there, it would be good to have a bus that's a shuttle.
And the buses need to go more frequently, and they need to be smaller. I don't know if, they're ridiculously big, and they're always empty. And I make a point during the day of noticing who's on the buses. You've got double-decker buses, you've got double buses with 5 people on them. It'd be much better to have smaller buses that go more frequently than these.
So,
Okay, one last thing on the aging in place. We were going to invite that professor, and I had sent you an email, but it got, I think you weren't feeling well, it got lost. So my question was, should the chair of the commission be the one that gives this guy is like supposed to be some aging and expert place, right? So
Yeah.
it would be more appropriate maybe for the chair to invite him than for me.
Yeah.
So could I send Greg the contact information for this professor? Because I
That
got
seems
it.
appropriate, doesn't it? Or should the staff person do that?
If we invite this UC Berkeley professor, he's an expert on aging.
You can make that contact and just
Okay.
let us know.
we
well,
could
I'll-
allocate time on the agenda, so.
Yeah, that's what we need to know, is if there's a commitment and if there's any AV needs and.
I'll email
Okay.
you with his
Yeah.
contact.
And usually we recommend, a presentation of 10 to 20 minutes and a time for questions, depending on what's on the agenda. So if you think,
Yeah.
so an idea of the timing of the presentation so that we can build the agenda accordingly.
A lot of this aging-friendly community stuff is his work.
Oh, that's great then.
Yeah.
It'd be good to have
Yeah.
him.
Terrific. All right, so review of commission work plan. So we had last time talked about filling out the housing and other subcommittee. We were hoping, housing subcommittee, we were hoping to have Judy here so that we could finish that. I did not, reach out to her about any updates on her preference other than what she had stated last time of an interest in both aging and housing.
Yeah.
So in her absence, we can continue, we can work this out next meeting or
Do you work which out?
the sort of composition of the housing
Yes.
subcommittee.
Yeah. She's still not settled?
The last time I heard from her, she was interested in both aging and in housing. And then at our last meeting, because, we had multiple people interested, we talked about waiting until she was back to kind of figure out exactly how the pieces would
I'm
fall.
interested in aging and housing, too.
And in housing, I think they're popular committees. So, if there are things to be done in the next month, then you can do it.
Well,
ad hoc.
if you like, I could give you a brief update,
Okay.
if that would be helpful. We didn't schedule an update because we haven't had a meeting in a while.
Yeah.
We did have a meeting of staff, and we talked about the program.
Who is we, just so I have an idea? Who is we?
Ms. Bond and Isabel and Sid and me, and that was it, right?
Okay.
Judy was out at that point. And it's sort of two things that emerged out of that meeting. One is that a feeling that I think, now tell me if you have a different view, Isabel, but I thought there was a feeling that it was better that this be done right than it be done quickly. and that having it be,
Forum, is
part,
that
yeah,
right?
yeah, and then having it be part of the EBHO Affordable Housing Week wasn't necessary. In fact, it might get lost in that context a little bit. So that there was I don't think there was a rush to do that. There also was a bit of a discussion about having Nancy Skinner and what that meant, because the feeling of the staff was very much that if she were there, she needed to be the keynote because she's a state senator and, you know, she'd have the highest status. And my concern is she has a very clear opinion about this. And so if we start with her as the keynote, we really don't have a balanced presentation of the issues for people. And I think, although we've kind of identified the goals of this event, I'm not sure we've talked enough about what the content needs to be and how it needs to be organized so that it will be most effective. Just having a couple of speakers who have very clear points of view may not be very helpful to people. It may be more confusing than anything.
Well, one thing I'd really be interested in, I understand that after those moms in Oakland, you know, they're going to be buying that house or whatever. I'd like to hear one of them talk at a housing forum, but they also started a foundation in Oakland to buy property, to help people, you know, buy and I'd like to see us start a foundation in Albany to help people
So
do that.
this update is not on the agenda, so I think the
so
discussion
that's-
is
yeah,
going
they
a
wanna
little
give a discussion.
further than
Yeah.
subcommittee,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes, so.
So we're going to meet again in a couple of weeks and talk about this more, and we're still planning to go forward with it. I just feel that we need to talk a little bit more about what it is we're trying to do and what's the best way to accomplish that.
All right, thank you. So we'll complete the housing subcommittee and sort of the subcommittee formation next time. Go ahead, I'm sorry, Martha.
We're not talking about
Oh, yeah, no, you can talk about the work, you know, because on the work plan is review of commission work plan, so you can talk about your work plan, but not, I wouldn't go into too much details about each of the item. The other thing, though, I wanted to mention as I was reviewing the work plan, if you do plan to do anything more than what is under community inclusivity, then what's already in your work plan, you will need to do an amendment, a request to amend your work plan, because it looks like here that there are two items and they have been done. You know, identify service needs to support, that's in progress. You've developed a model for an annual Albany diversity report. That's the EEO report posted on the website. And then there was another one, I thought. It was the social equity impact.
That's right.
Yes, report on city staff report, and that's also been included. So if you do plan to discuss further an MLK event, or then you would need to do a work plan amendment request.
So can that be
council.
brought to, can we discuss that the next meeting and what that looks like? Or?
Yes, so I think that, yes, and if the commission, so I would, at the next meeting, you could present a preliminary plan, and if the commission chooses to move forward, then, well, before moving forward, it would have to go, the next step would be to request an amendment to the work plan.
And that has to go to council. Right. Okay, great. So for future agenda items, I know that future agenda items. Aging in place, we'll hear from again.
Housing,
We'll
we
hear
should
an
have
update on
reports.
housing, update, I'm sure, from inclusivity and diversity, including this work plan issue.
I suggested a preliminary discussion about youth.
That's right. A discussion about how the commission can figure out a way forward on addressing needs of youth.
Sugar beverage tax for the youth, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Although I thought you were suggesting.
I was
for a
suggesting it as
broader-
ultimately a-
So you're saying like a, okay.
an item, a
Okay,
work plan
okay,
item, yeah.
okay.
And the item should include a discussion on whether or not to request a work plan amendment
Yeah.
for the youth discussion.
Okay.
And we certainly will take up the sugar-sweetened beverage tax and finish that next time, right, Isabel? Anything else that we know now we want to put on the future agenda?
Well, there's rent review and Albany Cares. So-
Yeah, we got to finish those.
Okay. Oh, I had thought that we had finished,
Oh, sorry, you have finished Albany Cares, yes.
so we'll
yes.
finish rent review and we'll finish sugar-sweetened. Okay. All right, anything else?
That's
All right, in that case, our next meeting is Tuesday, April 7th, 7:30, right here, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.